Somebody who spent 3 days on the streets is Pete Hegseth. You know him, Weekend Fox and Friends co-host. He's also a major in the Army National Guard, posted in Washington, D.C. He joins us right now. So, Pete, you were out on the street. What was it like?
Well, it was a dicey scene, guys. I was standing our unit was effectively guarding right where Mark Meredith was. And Griff, the reporters were on the other side of the line. I saw Kevin Cork and some of our colleagues out there reporting. Listen, I thank God for the men and women who wear the uniform of the Metro PD, of the federal agencies that were there, and then of the D.C. National Guard for what they stood up for, what they took, the vile things said about them to them as they stood on the line. And listen, it was an honor to serve with them. And if the National Guard had not been called up, I can't help but think where Washington, D.C. would be right now. And I watched on the ground Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night as our numbers grew. Presence was aggressive on Monday with the curfew and working with the Metro PD to effectively make sure crowds were able to peacefully protest, which there was a lot of that. But at the same time, I watched bottles and bricks and rocks be thrown at us throughout. And if there hadn't been, there was one point, guys, I was standing for 30 minutes at the Vietnam War Memorial, guarding the Vietnam War Memorial. And I thought to myself, how in the world am I in our nation's capital guarding the Vietnam War Memorial because the protesters who say they want to exercise their First Amendment right really want to deface the Lincoln Memorial or the Washington Memorial or the Vietnam Memorial? It was surreal. It really was to be outside of Lafayette Park, expanding the perimeter, defending the White House effectively, because it wasn't just about protests. This was a violent anti-cop, anti-American riot at many levels that would have gone much further without the additional federal support.
It was remarkable, Pete, watching you and watching your fellow guardsmen there doing this. And it's important to remember that your mission is allowing this protective, safe space for those protesters to vent this justified anger after what happened to George Floyd. But speak to me about how difficult it is for particularly even the younger guardsmen, people younger than you and I, who have no preparation for this sort of absolute vile treatment where you have these protesters, some of them agitators, trying to incite violence to get you to take the bait.
Griff, I'm so proud of these young men and women. Listen, I stood there with a shield and a mask on and heard people scream at me. I've heard it all, so I'm used to it. But imagine a young kid, 19, 20, 21, a black kid from Washington, D.C., or black girl from Washington, D.C., standing on that line, and the utter hatred being screamed at them, the things they're being accused of. They're traitors of their country, traitors of their race, frankly, some things I would never want anyone else to ever hear. And they stood that line, stone-faced, saying, my job is to protect your First Amendment right to protest, and you can scream at me all you want. What you can't do is then pick up a brick or a rock. They threw water bottles and other things all night long, fireworks. Those things were commonplace where we were, but they never, ever flinched. And there wasn't any mistreatment. There wasn't any targeting on our side. Instead, it made me proud of the oath of office they took, and it was remarkable to watch. But it also reminded me how vile this other side of the protest can be. Yes, there were a lot of peaceful protesters, but if they could have, guys, they would have defaced every monument. They would have looted every business they could, and they would have gone all the way to the White House. They wanted to. We were standing outside Lafayette Park, in Lafayette Park, with the White House as a backdrop. It was surreal, watching people who didn't want to just protest outside the gates. They wanted to go over them. I watched churches with the most vile graffiti on them you can imagine around the White House. They wanted to go further, tear down our country, take down the cops, defund the cops. What they want to do is destroy America. I'm talking about the hardcore members that are not protesters, that are trying to use this to destroy our union. It's so clear on the ground what their mission is, and it's scary, guys.
Yeah, as the week has progressed, we have seen most of those protests turn peaceful, and that was the agenda in the beginning. And you're right, it's our right to do that. So that's actually good news. But the looting, that's not okay. What did you make of Bill de Blasio's comments, the mayor of New York, saying that you guys, National Guard, not trained to come into New York City and help the police officers?
He's a fool. Listen, I wasn't trained on the streets of Washington, D.C., but what we did is we integrated in with the Metro Police Department in Washington, D.C. They know the city, but they also know where they don't have enough manpower. So the first night, on Monday night, I was literally in a van with my riot gear, and the Metro PD were giving directives to the National Guard, go to this intersection, go to that intersection, go to this intersection, and we would stand there with our shields and masks and be prepared to deal with a siege of protesters or rioters if they came our way, and you block them to another part of the city. You can seamlessly integrate with the guys that know the ground the best, and that's precisely what happened in Washington, D.C., and that's why you saw it evolve into more peaceful protests. Guys, there was a big show of force on Monday night, you'll recall, in Washington, D.C., and that show of force was part of why we got to Wednesday, the last night that I was there, where it was largely peaceful, because it was understood we have the numbers and the ability to contain this. You are allowed to peacefully protest. You're not allowed to loot and riot. So he could easily, I know the Fighting 69th guys in Manhattan. That's the unit in downtown Manhattan. I've also been in that unit. They're fantastic. They half of them are New York City cops. They could integrate very quickly and add value. So that's an excuse to me. I think it's a pride thing in New York City. If he wanted to integrate them, it could be done so very quickly.
Well, we appreciate your service deployed on the streets of Washington, D.C. So this weekend, you're back to your regular job. Who's coming up on Fox and Friends Weekend?
Let's see here. We've got Herman Cain is on the program. We've got Adam Kinzinger, my good buddy who's also in the National Guard. We'll talk about the use of National Guard troops, and Marsha Blackburn, amongst others. And it'll be a great weekend. But I got to give a shout out to my man Griff. We only missed each other by like 45 minutes each night. I was there till 4 in the morning on the line, and Griff would show up with his microphone 45 minutes later. We didn't get a chance to fist pump, you know?
We didn't, but we will this weekend. Major, job well done. I just tell this story.
Thank you, brother.
You were actually doing the work protecting. Thanks, Pete.
Great job, Pete.